You're listening in on an animated discussion about Batman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from the cinematropolis.com. And today's topic is Season 2, Episode 3, Trial.
Oh, Caleb, we have been waiting for the trial.
Yes, we have.
It is so good. I mean, it's one of the ones, right? Like everybody talks about,
right?
You know,
Heart of Ice, Two-Face, Trial.
Definitely. That's the trifecta. Whoa, and it super duper holds up.
Oh, super holds up. I think it is guilty of its critical acclaim, as if I do say so myself. I think this episode holds up fantastically. It is fun. It's got the philosophical analysis, I guess. I'm trying to say it has a conversation with itself about the nature of Batman.
Absolutely, and addresses it in a way that me, as the hardcore superhero guy, is like, well, thank you for taking the time, you know, to make this philosophical point clear.
Right.
But we'll get to that. We'll get to it.
At least making it clear what the show thinks about this argument, which
right.
I think's really, really great, and gives us a better idea about the philosophy that the showrunners have on Batman fighting crime.
Yeah, exactly.
Tells you a lot about their vision for the character.
So let us begin, as we do, with the title card. Caleb, how did you feel about this title card?
Meh. Cool music. Visual was super lazy. Blind Lady Justice. I get it. That's like an iconic American thing. But it just didn't feel, I don't know, inspired. Probably not a lot of inspiration, really.
So the thing that I think saves it and kind of moves it from like your C to maybe a low B for me is the way that they shoot and light Lady Justice. It's towering above you.
Right.
The shadows are very sinister. And I mean, there's always a hint of the sinister to Justice, you know, depending on how you look at that iconography. Is the blindness good or bad? Like, there's all these conversations to be had about Lady Justice. And since this is the villains putting Batman on trial after the DA wants to put Batman on trial. So we get Lady Justice, but it's also shot in this, you know, oppressive noir style and looming over you. I liked that bit. I liked that Justice was sinister in this title card, but I feel like that's as far as they went with any kind of artistic statement.
Yeah, that's fair. I think framing Lady Justice as somewhat sinister looking, I think it fits the tone. I definitely didn't gather that. So maybe that's from a C to a C plus. I still don't think it's like a wow, this really sums up the episode very clearly.
I agree.
In a visual image.
100% agree. I'm also, because this is a little game I play with myself, but I'm also kind of hard pressed to figure out what would have been a better approach. I mean, we tend to kind of wind up spitballing the lesser ones into better ones, like what we think would be better ones. And I'm having a real hard time with this one because there's a lot going on.
Well, I mean, even if you put like the silhouette of the Joker with the red grin with the hair piece or something like that.
Sure, but if this were all Joker, like if it were none of the rest of the villains, I would agree 100%.
Or you could do the jury with you could do silhouettes of the jury with little tiny things, you know, with the same shadowy.
I like this.
I mean,
like this.
Listen, they don't. All right, Warner Brothers, check in the mail, please. No, I mean, this is just me spitballing it, but it doesn't feel like they thought about it for very long.
No, it's true. Or they fell in love with the very first idea, which was justice but sinister.
Sure, and that happens sometimes.
Sure, and it's not. And I don't think it's bad. It's just fine. Yeah. I'm with you on that. It could certainly have been worse because I would actually, if they had done Judge Joker as the title card for this episode, I would have graded it lower. The image would be better, but it would actually kind of lie to us about the content of the episode. There is so much more going on.
I wouldn't
than
say
him.
lie. I don't think it would necessarily sum up the entirety of the episode.
Significantly less robust than it could be. Because again, I love him and he is important and one of the focal points of the courtroom scene. But there's also just a billion other things going on in the courtrooms.
Sure.
So let's talk about this because this is a good segue for me to talk about something that I saw.
Sure.
The roles that everyone plays in the courtroom.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
They're perfect.
It's so funny. Yeah.
I mean, even even the less obvious ones, like the ventriloquist as the bailiff.
Yeah, as the bailiff, Two-Face is the prosecutor. I mean, come on.
Well, I guess you have kind of two bailiffs in a way, because you have Croc doing the escort in, escort out. But the voice of the court is the ventriloquist.
Yes.
And it's perfect because the ventriloquist is bad at it.
Oh,
and Scarface is awesome at it.
Yes, but no one listens to Scarface. No one listens to the ventriloquist. They all listen to Scarface.
He said, "Oh yeah, you mugs," is just beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Two-Face is kind of the easy pull, but they just kill it. Like the chaos of this court embodied in Judge Joker. The otherwise kind of more intellectual villains by and large that they have as the jury.
Oh yeah,
totally works.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The jury: Ivy, Croc, Riddler, Mad Hatter, Harley Quinn, and Scarecrow,
who we also pull in as witnesses.
As witnesses, yes, correct.
Which shows so much about how this court would work.
Oh, the whole thing was rigged from the get go. I think we all realized that. I think what was surprising though is the way it pays off is when you're like, okay, well, of course they're going to give him a guilty verdict. Oh no, he's innocent. You're right. He did not create us, but we're gonna because you're convinced we're terrible people, we're just going to kill you anyway.
Right, we're going to do it anyway.
Right.
My headcanon for this is that and this is so subtextual that I'm declaring it headcanon, but that the jury actually threw Judge Joker a curveball there. Like the conversation before this was, we get him in here, we have our laughs, we put him on trial, we prove that he's responsible for us, and then we murder him. And everybody was like, yeah. And then this jury of intellectuals curveball Judge Joker, and it's his curveball to their curveball that's like, yeah, but you just proved we're all jerks. We're going to do it anyway.
Right.
It just makes me happy.
I think that's fun. I think it's a fun way to read it, and I think it also fits all the characters here. I really appreciate that it highlights how good Van Dorn is at her job. So this is the character, the only character introduced in this episode, General Janet Van Dorn. I guess she wasn't introduced in this episode. I think she made a small appearance in The Cat in the Claw Part 1.
Did she?
I think. Different voice actress, though.
Interesting. I don't remember that at all. Well, but that's fine. That's how these little bits of continuity are supposed to work.
I don't even know if she had a name. That's how much of it. It wasn't like introduction.
We had a new DA.
There was a different DA that was a woman.
Yeah, no, I appreciate very much Van Dorn's capability, right? She outdoes the last Golden Boy DA in the courtroom in Harvey Dent. He was
very good at his job, by the way.
Right, exactly. Like we established, Harvey Dent was legitimately good at his job, and then Van Dorn is legitimately better. It's that strong, and I like that she starts in a place philosophically that we can kind of understand, and ends in a place that makes much more sense for Gotham. I like her arc a lot. She gets an arc in this, and it's so good.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. She full character growth, right? She starts saying Batman's a problem. In fact, actually, strongly disliking Batman.
Yeah.
Her quote to Gordon exactly is, "Batman is a drug the city keeps taking to avoid facing reality." I was like, ouch, that stings. And so she is completely against Batman, gets taken in, and because she's good at her job, is forced to defend a client she doesn't like, but because she's good at her job, she does it anyway. And through doing that, she's like, oh, wait, what I thought about Batman was only partially correct. There's a whole other side of the story, which is these people who he's fighting would have been criminals of some sort anyway.
Right. They would have been awful regardless.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this would have happened whether there was a Batman or not.
Well, they might not have been like the big theatrical villains, but they would have been criminals.
Exactly. And okay. And let's talk about what again, this is subtextual enough to be headcanon, but considering how much you and I have talked about the Mad Hatter, I feel like the Mad Hatter is maybe the turning point for her, because his outburst, I would have killed her first,
right,
does two amazing things. Like for me, one of those is I think that's the turning point for Van Dorn. Like she's been seeing, as she has to put together a logical puzzle that defends Batman. That's the moment when she's like, maybe goes, oh, okay.
Maybe saying you're going to kill someone before Batman ruins your life is not a great way to make yourself look like a great witness.
The person you love, right? Ostensibly, this person. Now, and here's what I love what it does for us. Mad Hatter is now on the tin that incel character.
Oh yeah, basically.
Because, I mean, we've always known this. We've been talking about this, and it's not the way that we would have described him back then. But I mean,
the incel is a relatively new term.
Not a new phenomenon.
No,
like I mean, I think it applies backwards. But of course, they wouldn't say that in the show.
Well, no, we just have a name for that. Which again, for those of our listeners who haven't heard previous conversations about Mad Hatter, we're talking about people. Think about angry nerds on the internet who are feel like their fandom is under attack and are gaslighting women, people of color. Basically, anyone who threatens to break the image of what their version of reality is. It crops up in fandoms a lot, but
absolutely,
but it's
all over.
But all over. I mean, you can see this in terrorist organizations. All over the place.
It's the unwilling celibate.
Right.
Like, I don't want to be celibate, but none of the women like me. Why is that? And I mean, anyway, it's a very complex problem that we don't want to reduce down to nothing or down to sound bites. But at the same time, I mean, the Mad Hatter's there, right? At the point that he's saying, I would have murdered the woman I loved before I let Batman take her away from me. We are not actually talking about love. We are talking about obsession.
And infatuation.
Infatuation to the level of obsession, because I will murder her before somebody else has her. Anyway, I like... It kind of shows that subtext we were reading from the vantage point of 2018,
kind of goes to the
2019.
surface. Yeah.
Yeah. They were also in the 90s doing that subtext. They just didn't want to make it part, I guess, sort of text of the show.
Sure. Well, and I want to reiterate that, I mean, while we are very aware of incels now,
yes,
like maybe they were observing these traits, but didn't necessarily know. I mean, like you said, it wasn't an identified thing that had a name. It was more like a casual observation and incorporating those, like, hey, this is a guy who can't get a girlfriend, so what does he do? He gets like he has all these dark fantasies,
rage-filled,
and it turns into resentment and rage inside, and then he goes and kidnaps a woman, and tries to convince her to love him. That's a thing that I think was going on, and it was a lot different in the 90s. That it just wasn't,
and we talked about it differently, or not at all, except this is our stories kind of talking about it. Anyway, it's a complicated sort of ball of terrible yarn.
Yeah, go look up. Okay, listeners, actually, instead of hearing us try to explain this, just go look it up. I think the New York Times or Washington, recently, maybe it was the Atlantic, one of these major publications have done a really great deep dive analysis on like the phenomenon of incels, and kind of it better explains what that is. And I'll maybe we can link it in the show notes.
It's absolutely. So check the show notes for the best article that I could find on this phenomenon. So let's dig into Van Dorn's arc and the psychology and the meta question that's mixed into that. Caleb, how would you frame this meta question?
Well, the meta question is Batman causing more harm than good? Is he creating more villains than he's putting away? Is he actually making Gotham a better place? Or is he just putting out the fires that he starts? Kind of that idea.
Right, that he starts. That's the key, right? Mm-hmm. I think. Because is he just putting out fires or is he doing real good is almost a separate question after we deal with...
But like, is he ultimately responsible for all of the crime in Gotham?
And we have seen different versions of Batman address this in different ways. The Nolan trilogy specifically calls it out as escalation.
Right.
I don't love it. I don't like it. Because again, this is a world built around Batman.
Sure.
Therefore, he is inherently necessary. I just like it built in that Gotham is very, very bad.
Well, I mean, I think the Nolan movies don't have any problem showing you how terrible Gotham is. Batman Begins goes out of your way to show you.
I agree. But the making it textual that, the Joker is on the label an escalation of the thing that you're doing.
Oh, sure.
It's not the first one. It's the most visible.
Right.
And I didn't like it.
Right.
I didn't like it when it was done anyway.
And I don't think it's necessarily saying Batman's responsible per se, but it's like whenever you...
And Gordon says that.
I mean, he does, but what he's saying is whenever you come in and do things good, the bad guys are going to up their game, basically. Is that Batman's fault? This is America, yo. I don't know. Competition.
I mean, there's definitely a way to move out of that space that accepts the escalation argument. But again, we're superhero stories. I mean, if you go to the comic books, the Gotham supervillains aren't the first supervillains in the world. This is a little bit of a different question depending on the continuity you're dealing in. Right.
Well, and also I want to toss out there something Nolan's movies does put on the label and takes a stance that I think is not super clear, is the idea of not only escalation but copycats. Like, what separates Batman from a normal vigilante? And Nolan's answer is, I'm not wearing a hockey pads. I'm richer than you.
Yeah, it really brings up the question and puts it to bed in a very unsatisfying way.
Right.
And I have often wondered if that was the purpose or if that was a poor choice.
I think that's the purpose.
I don't like that either.
I know you don't like it, but I'm pretty sure that was the point.
That's aggressively terrible. I mean, I'd almost prefer it to just be a mess. But it does tie to the way that Van Dorn frames the question.
Yes.
She talks about the supervillains as a lunatic fringe Batman created. Right. Which would also apply to a bunch of people in hockey masks wearing Batman outfits, you know. But as far as BTAS taking philosophical stances on these questions, it looked at what does it mean to be inspired by Batman in the episode we covered, I Am the Night.
Sure.
And takes a much more aspirational, positive look at that, which I prefer. Not across all continuities. That's the point of different continuities, right? But I, talking about like a Batman apotheosis, they take what I would consider a more defensible stance.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well,
but I love where Van Dorn starts. That just suggestion, lunatic fringe, Batman created. It's definitive. She has no room in her worldview for these supervillains as anything other than Batman's fault. So it's a strong stance.
The victims really, I mean, she never calls them that, but in a roundabout way, they kind of are if you're taking that perspective.
Yeah, yes. She could actually not just hold him responsible for the harm that they do, but the perceived harm that he does to them by making them supervillains.
Right, which is something that actually comes up again in an episode we'll eventually talk about, which is on Over the Edge. They actually have a scene kind of talking about that where they're interviewing members of some of Batman's rogues gallery who are like, listen, we're the victims here.
Yeah.
We'll get to that at another later episode.
Sure.
But it is an idea that comes up frequently in Batman, the animated series.
That's an insight that I hadn't really seen in that particular facet, right? The idea that she may be holding him responsible for them as victims of Batman. And boy, doesn't that make her shift in the courtroom.
Oh, yeah.
It was fine. It made sense. But just looking at that particular facet, that if she is angry at Batman for the harm that she perceives him doing to the people, look what he turned them into. And then every time she asks them a question about it, they're like, nope, this was 100% my call. This would have happened one way or the other.
I was an awful person anyway.
Yeah. Batman
just made me up my game.
Even Harley, who takes responsibility for her twist. For her twisted, Van Dorn tries to put it in a perspective as the Joker twisted her mind. And she's like, nope, I fell in love with him. I made my choices, which I like because it gives Harley her agency.
Right.
Harley's story isn't all about the Joker.
All the time.
Yeah, she chose this. And which, by the way, we don't really see this played out in BTAS in the way that we would love to see it. But that means she can also choose not the Joker.
Right.
And anyway.
She does sometimes.
She does sometimes.
Her and Ivy have a thing.
Yeah,
we're
absolutely.
We're definitely going to keep talking about throughout not just in that one episode. It's throughout the show.
We actually see suggestions of it in this episode when everybody's teamed up to capture Batman. It's a Harley and Ivy duo that take Batman out.
Right.
Love it.
Exactly.
Love it. And then we have a bunch of jealous nonsense in the courtroom between Joker and Harley, but I guess that's also thematically appropriate.
It's complicated. It's very complicated.
Right.
I mean, Harley Quinn's psychology is pretty complicated, I'd say.
The worst thruffle in the history of thruffles.
Oh, thruffled. One thing, and I want to keep going on that question, but there are a couple of things, little subtopics in here I want to talk about while we're talking about Van Dorn. First, I love how in the briefest moment, it's the briefest scene where she's either meeting Bruce Wayne or maybe a date. It's kind of ambiguous.
Yeah.
And she's all like, yeah, Bruce, you're so great. And Bruce is the guy, he's always like, but Batman, he's like, I see you all over the news and you're always talking about this Batman guy. What's the deal? And she's like, I don't want to talk about it. And he keeps talking about it.
I know. It's interesting to see Bruce Wayne a little uncomfortable with a member of the law enforcement community, right? Being that not okay with Batman, right? He had Harvey before Harvey went bad. He's had Gordon all this time. Bullock is easy to dismiss because Bullock is terrible.
And
right?
He's also a crooked cop.
Right. You can just skip, I don't have to care what Bullock thinks about me. But this new crusading district attorney really not liking Batman, it feels like it's a little uncomfortable for Bruce. Like he can't quite let it go.
Man, it's his ego. He's got to get everyone on his side. He's like, but no, really, Batman's a great guy. How do you not see this? And then she gets a call. And
I love it. I like that I like to see that little bit of vulnerability. I mean, I do think it's ego. Like, no, you're on the side of this where you should see the good that I do. I don't want you to not see the good that I do as Batman.
Right. And it gets amped up if you read that as a mini date.
Right.
I mean,
right.
it's not very clear, but
it's not clear. I think for myself, I like to read it as a second date.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
It feels like
it's
that.
early on so that they're interested. They're past the first date kind of awkwardness, but it's a second or third date.
Yeah, because
we're not sure where this is going.
They're pretty candid with each other. That's what I'm saying. He immediately starts talking about Batman. And she's like, oh, last person I want to talk about.
Right. Let's leave work at work kind of thing is cool. So you did those conversations the first couple dates. And now it's like, is this going to become a thing or not a thing?
And then
that's how I read it.
And then it never happens in another episode ever again.
I know we never talk about it. No. But to be honest, what a way to have your second or third date ruined, right? Like, maybe let's just not do this.
Just gets kidnapped by Harley Quinn and Ivy. Yeah. My next note, jumping ahead a little bit, it's towards the end of the courtroom scenes where she's clearly started to she's been swayed with that perspective, and then she starts applying pressure points on their psychological weaknesses, and it's kind of hilarious.
It's also classic Batman moves, right?
Yes,
She'd have no way of knowing this.
Right.
But once she starts to move towards Batman's side, she immediately starts to use Batman's tactics. I love it.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
She gets Harley. She turns the Harley against the Joker for cheating on her, or not necessarily cheating on her, but like
thinking to the cops.
Yes. There's also Van Dorn torments Ivy with the flower. She's like, "Oh, what? You're working with the Joker with this flower? He murders every time he pulls it out. Like, that was great." And it freaks Ivy out. I thought it was
very strong.
Great writing.
Very strong. And also her, kind of using those facts against the Mad Hatter is when we see that explosion that, kind of solidifies our view of him.
Oh, yeah.
She really goes hard on every single one of those people. And I wonder, now that we've brought up this idea that she considers them something of Batman's victims, it makes me wonder if she was maybe a little easier on them in the actual courtroom than she was here, right? Because she was seeing them as a victim.
Right.
Because all of this seemed very much a shock to them when she did it to them. So clearly these are not tactics she used on them in the regular courtroom.
Oh, of course not. No, I think she actually, at the beginning of the episode, she actually helps Ivy get off from going, instead of going to prison, she goes back to Arkham Asylum.
Right.
Because Batman was the one who arrested Ivy, who brought in Ivy. There's no way they could possibly prosecute her. So they sent her to an insane asylum.
Yeah. So I think it's worth saying that this is not how the law works at all. And I'm going to let it go because this is a kid's show. But at the same time, I kind of don't want to let it go because this is a kid's show that doesn't always be a kid show.
Yeah.
So on one hand, I'm like, I really want to interrogate that. And on the other hand, I'm like, the show clearly does not want to interrogate that. This is not remotely how the law works on any level. So just put a pin in that. This is the first time I think where I've said, but wait, you guys don't always act like a kid show in a negative way. Where I'm like, you guys need to be more serious about this.
It's just inconsistent. Yeah.
Exactly. Usually that inconsistency is sort of challenging the younger viewer to up their story watching game. Like the story is working at another level that challenges the younger viewer to rise to it.
Correct.
Right? And in this case, it's more like the other way around, where it's like, oh, good, this is only a kid's show. We can dumb it down.
Yeah.
So I think this is the first time I'm ever really disappointed in that.
It's really just a shortcut in the writing to get the plot where they want it to go, and that's unfortunate. It does happen even on adult shows. They do stuff like that.
Oh,
all
absolutely,
the time. So,
absolutely. One of my number one complaints with the season 2 of Daredevil on Netflix is that they want us to take the courtroom stuff seriously, but do no work to make it good.
Yeah.
They do no work to make it consistent. So yeah, it's definitely a trap. More than just BTAS has fallen into. It's just usually with this show,
it doesn't do that.
It doesn't do that.
Right.
It does the more challenging thing. So,
so kind of moving on past Van Dorn.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to add on that? I think a big token. I guess the only thing I would add is just the takeaway. I think is pretty clear, and because they pretty straightforward state the thesis she does in her conclusion. Hey, Batman's not the problem. You all would have turned out awful anyway. He just might have made you more theatrical in your terror awfulness.
You would not be less awful.
No.
Yeah. And if it's not summed up there, the final moment between Batman and Van Dorn really wraps it up.
Oh yeah, for her and Batman.
Yes, they're now on the same team. Like they may never work together in the way that Harvey and Batman did. Right. Like really sharing intel and stuff. But her statement that I'm still going to keep working for a city that doesn't need Batman, and Batman's response of, me too.
Yep.
So good. It's a really good wrap up of that arc for her, and also, you know, where we want to wind up as viewers, I think.
Well, and also it's telling us as viewers that at least Batman in whenever this is, thought that there was still an end to whatever he's doing. You know what I mean?
You know, I think even if we enter into a more genre savvy space where we know darn good and well that there's never going to be an end for Batman, that's still the ideal, right?
Well, that's the character. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's a character trait.
Knowing that there never will be a Gotham that doesn't need Batman does not mean we don't get up every single day and work for a Gotham that doesn't need Batman.
And I'd argue that even in the real world, there wouldn't be a day. I mean, listen,
it's a process.
Listen, fighting evil. Yeah, it's a process. Fighting evil, putting down I don't like to oversimplify as bad guys, but overcoming evil in whatever facet it might exist, whatever label you put on it. I don't like putting bad guys on it. I think the world's a lot more complicated than that. But whenever you're fighting evil, which I do think is a thing that you can put a label on, and you should put a label on, it is not you do it once, it's done. It's not like you're just checking off task lists and eventually there's a conclusion. Because guess what? Evil is going to keep rearing its neck over and over again. No matter how many times you put it back down, it's going to come back in one form or another.
In some other way. And it's always a process.
Right. So I think the idea, even real world in the fiction, I don't think there's any way that Batman's ever totally done. It's more like he just retired. At best, he retires.
It is such an optimistic way to view the war on crime in Gotham while also accepting that there is not an end to this war on crime.
Right.
You know,
But you do understand he does have a goal. He does have a vision, which is I also want to work towards Gotham.
You got it. That was awesome. He has not a goal, but a vision. Well done. That's the stark difference that I was grasping for. Good job.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, cool. So one thing I want to note on is, and this is just random stuff. I've crossed over into random things I like about this episode.
Yeah. No. We've done the big stuff. Let's have our dessert because there's a lot of really cool moments in this episode.
Firstly, the Joker saying "Let's Mambo" when they're after he's cast the verdict or sentenced the Batman. I love his Firstly, I love his judge outfit, but his executor getup I think is even better with the hat.
Father Joker the priest is just super disturbing and also amazing and also funny.
It's hilarious. Yeah. Oh, it's A+ Joker stuff. I also thought the sequence when Van Doren takes the Batarang and throws it to knock the light out on the Blu-ray set, the full remastered whatever.
Yes.
Holy crap, guys! It looks beautiful.
It's
the way that the lighting effect, the animation with the lighting effects they have in there, incorporating the warm oranges contrasted with like the blues and the grays you just saw. It is stunning animation. A++.
It's also as funny as Joker has been up till this point. It is for me the best Joker line is then because somebody's like, nobody panic. And then Harley gets taken and he gets the belt back. And it's like, okay, now start panicking.
Yeah.
Accurate. And that is like a whole mood right there. Like just now is the moment. Start panicking. And sure enough, panic. He's now in control of the situation.
Well, I like how when the lights go out, they're like, "Don't let him get away." And Batman's like, "Who said I was leaving?"
Oh, so good, yeah. And then grabs Van Doren. We don't forget that there's a civilian in there,
right?
And that stern like shush finger, and then they just vanish.
Yes,
awesome. It's whole fantastic sequence from there to the escape is all good. It's all good. I also really appreciated the running into Scarecrow. Scarecrow's really menacing in that moment.
He actually has no lines in this episode, by the way. That's what's terrifying. He's got that big scythe in the hallway.
And just grinning. This is the best that design of Scarecrow is ever going to look.
Correct.
And then to have Batman cornered by the ventriloquist in Scarface. And when Scarface, we talked about this in the introduction, when he loses his hand, this gruesomeness is just immediately changed into hilarity by Scarface's own line. Like he gets his head knocked off, and before it even hits the ground, he's like, "I'm hit, boy."
Yeah.
I mean, this is good. It's exciting, and Batman is not immediately out of trouble just because it got dark and he got the belt. Like it's still it's work to get out.
To cite one of your favorite comics of all time, Watchmen. Movies. I don't know if it's a comic line or if it's a movie line, but
it's both.
It's both. It's definitely. I was thinking about the Rorschach line, like whenever they start freaking out, he's like, "Oh, Batman's doing the whole, oh, I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me," and it's kind of hilarious. Yeah. I love that whole dynamic because it turns it into a horror movie, except for Batman, the serial killer stalking everybody.
Oh man, boy, there's another viewpoint reversal I hadn't thought about. That's fantastic.
Oh, it's just how fast the room turned, and it's all of a sudden you're like, oh, it reminds me of, oh boy, this is totally gonna fall to my alternate media recommendations now. But it's a movie called You're Next, where it starts off like a typical serial killer trope. There's like all these people who are this group of people who were just terrorizing a family that's having dinner in this house, and then but little did they know, oh, this is kind of a spoiler. Little did they know, one of the people might have been like lived in the Australian outback and trained how to like hunt all sorts of animals and stuff.
I like that reversal a lot.
And it's like, and then like all of a sudden, like within just like 5 minutes, the whole story you're watching just turns around. Anyway, I think this episode does that really well.
No, that's strong. The ending of Batman's escape is also great because Gordon saves Batman.
It's true.
That is an awesome reversal. That doesn't undermine either one of their competencies, you know, and
well, I love
so
how they plant those seeds throughout earlier in the episode because
Yeah.
Batman's just like, hey, he tells Van Dorn, he's like, just keep him talking. I have planted
I
seeds.
left a tracker to find me where, I mean, he didn't know it broke. And then Gordon certainly does fix it in the most like, I've got some super glue way ever, but whatever. It's good. We don't have time.
I will suspend my disbelief.
Yeah. And then Gordon gets to save Batman, which just doesn't happen. I don't want it to happen all the time, but I want it to happen more often
Every
now.
once in a while, I think a good Gordon coming to rescue, because it shows up, it illustrates a partnership.
Yes. And also Batman set it up. He knew he was going to need some backup eventually. In fact, he probably, when he said to Van Dorn, keep him talking, he probably, not knowing that his device had broken, expected Gordon to show up
Sooner.
way earlier
Oh, yeah.
and just solve this problem. And they were just, okay, we'll keep working it. We'll work the problem. He'll get here eventually. And
Right.
sure enough, in the clutch.
Yep.
So good.
I also thought Joker, again, father, priest, Joker, swinging around on the rooftops with that big mallet, the big hammer
Yes.
thing was kind of hysterical.
It's the stupidest murder attempt ever, which is extremely on brand for Joker.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was great. Oh man, Joshua, this episode's fantastic.
It really is.
It is upper tier 1 echelon Batman the Animated Series that I think absolutely everyone should watch.
Must watch,
Yes.
definitely.
If you're considering revisiting the show at all, you've got to put it up there with the greats. Now with that, Joshua, as always, we're going to close out the conversation with some alternate media recommendations. So what do you have for us today?
So you know that I typically try and stay not hard inside baseball, right? But I'm going to make a Batman comic book recommendation now because I really, and we talked about it, I really don't like that Batman causes the villains question, especially when it's really just trying to sort of put some real world sense on a fictional non-problem, right?
Correct.
Like in the end, we had villains after Batman because we had to publish Batman first so that anybody cared about Batman enough for us to add villains, right? Now we're going to try and put some real world context on that, and it's just whatever.
And this is a separate conversation, but we did mention the Nolan movies earlier. I think when we talk about how his films really dig into those questions, we'd be really remiss if we didn't mention that those were George W. Bush era movies that were certainly interrogating in a roundabout way how America deals with terrorists.
Yeah.
And
Batman is not a good person. He's not really the hero of those movies. He's just the less bad option.
he's the protagonist.
Sure, which is wildly different than a hero.
Right.
Or there's a Venn diagram, and depending on your story is how close they are to a circle.
Right. But I throw that out there because yes,
that's an important point.
Whenever you look at especially when you're looking at a comic book and you're looking at like when people are interrogating this question, what perspective are they taking? And when we talk about Nolan, everyone knows they're made more real world and meant to be more realistic.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I think it's really important that when we talk about those films, Nolan was wrestling with questions that were very prevalent with the culture
real world
at the time,
questions
at the time, which it goes back to the
definitely
terrorism question: is it okay for us to cross the line if we get the air quotes get the bad guys?
If we become a terrorist to beat terrorists, are we still okay?
Are we still okay?
And the answer is no.
No.
Until the very end when the answer is yes.
At the Dark Knight, I don't know. I think it's a little more ambiguous. That's another conversation. We might have to do that as like patron exclusive because I think I think there's a lot of different ways you can read that ending. Anyway,
so the comic book recommendation I'm going to make addresses this in an extremely deft way. I am going to recommend that you read Batman 0 Year. This was the rebooted universe origin for Batman. It is the best thing that happens in Scott Snyder's run. There's a lot of interesting stuff in Scott Snyder's run. I've mentioned it before that there's some stuff in there that I like so much. I wish we could insert it into the actual best Batman stories that Morrison did a few years before. But this thing really blows the lid off. 0 Year sets up an idea of supervillainy that still falls just short of what Gotham's supervillains would be. Why, but is operating while Bruce Wayne is still trying to figure out what his war on crime looks like. There's not a Batman yet, but there is a Red Hood.
Ah, yes.
And he is a thief, and he is a terrorist, and he is making a point with this big theatrical thing. And so in this case, it reframes that question to where Bruce realizes he must be more theatrical. He is attempting to fight a guerrilla war on crime and realizes, well, if this is the kind of thing that I'm going to have to deal with, I'm going to have to up my theatricality game. And it doesn't really like fundamentally change a lot of the way that Batman's origin works, but it just reframes the relationship between Batman and the Red Hood just enough. Like it twists the timeline just enough to make it clear that no, Batman is a response to Gotham's giant theatrical crime problem, not the other way around. It's deft. It is a deft reimagining that had not occurred to me, and I think about this stuff way too hard. And it just wowed me and delighted me, and is 100% the best thing that Scott Snyder did with Batman by far. It makes it much more of a superhero origin instead of what we had been working with for 20 years before that, which was this like dark, gritty noir origin from Frank Miller in year one. I mean, you can even hear it in the name. 0 Year. We're subverting things.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like we're going before year one.
It says that on the title, but there is also something else that happens late in the story involving the Riddler that puts Gotham City back to 0 Year. I will say no more. So it works on multiple levels. It's deft. It's wonderful. For today, I'm doing an inside baseball recommendation. Scott Snyder's Batman 0 Year. Caleb, tell me about your alternate media recommendations.
I've got some very unusual ones, Joshua, because as I sat here, I thought about what angle I wanted to take, and I was trying to find other superhero stories about interrogating this question that were not comic books, and there's actually not a ton of them that I could come up with initially and upon like an initial search. So, one, I'm just going to throw out there, Adam Wingard's horror movie, You're Next, which was not initially on my list, but talking about it in this episode, talking about how,
like that reversal.
how there's a total pivot between who's the hunter and the prey.
Yes.
I think it's a great recommendation. I think that's a great horror, especially if you're into horror, you got to watch it. It's great. To these other two, far more unusual though. First, Joshua, have you ever heard of the video game series Ace Attorney?
Yes, I have.
Where you actually play as a lawyer in a courtroom?
Oh, yes, I have.
Well, if you ever wanted to know what it was like to defend Batman in court, this is about as close as you can get in a video game.
Yeah, those are so bonkers. What's his name? It's even something weird like
Phoenix Wright or something like that.
Yes, that's what it is. Yeah. Phoenix Wright.
Right.
Ace Attorney.
Yeah.
They're so over the top.
It's so over the top, so bonkers, but those games are a lot of fun. They're on like every console. I think they initially were on like the DS, the 3DS, they're on the PlayStation 4 now, the Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, they're on everything, PC. So yeah, those are a ton of fun. And this next one. So if this episode is about putting Batman on trial, I thought, what's another story that has put a very iconic, beloved character on trial? You're never going to guess what I came up with.
I can't imagine.
Miracle on 34th Street.
Oh.
Interrogating the question of Santa Claus.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Is he real? If it doesn't matter if he's real, is he real? Oh. Is the idea of Santa Claus more important than having a real person be Santa Claus?
That's fantastic.
Just throwing that out there. I was bonkers, but I'm going for it. And I think there are multiple versions of Miracle on 34th Street you can latch onto. I personally, as a child, grew up with the one from 1994, I believe. So I recommend that one. Had Richard Attenborough, a.k.a. John Hammond from Jurassic Park, playing Santa Claus. So that's the one I recommend, but really you could watch any of them.
I love that. That's an absolute miracle of an alternate media recommendation. Well done. Well, that about wraps up this animated discussion. Caleb, where can people go to continue the conversation with you?
Well, Joshua, you can always find me on Twitter talking about film, television, video games, and all sorts of other pop culture goodness at C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. I'm also the editor-in-chief and film critic at the Cinematropolis, and we publish these in-depth essays on all types of different films, oftentimes including science fiction and superhero films, all the stuff you'd want to read about. And you can find all these articles at thecinematropolis.com. Joshua, what about you?
I'm also most active on Twitter, where you can find me easily enough at Joshua Unruh. And remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. Join us for our next animated discussion when we dig up Season 2, Episode 4, Avatar. We'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel.